Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. So as you can see from the title, we do finally have the description and potentially the release date for Azula in the Spirit Temple, but there is just one piece of news to cover before that, and that is the actual release of a comic. So Avatar The Last Airbender Aang's Unfreezing Day, the Chibi Comic, is out as of yesterday, February 1st, in comic book stores only. As you can see on screen here, from Edelweiss, the book is still listed as March 28th, 2023 for basically, this is regular bookstores, including the likes of like Amazon and stuff like that, where you'd get it from. This is the digital release date for this book as well. So you are going to have to wait another bit longer if you want to get this book from sort of like the usual channels. But if you do want it now, or just before March 28th, you will have to go to your local comic book store. But again, because this delay is more specifically because of specific distributors, and it's typically the idea, like most comic book stores, I think, use Diamond. Some of them do use the other distributor. Your comic book store might still not be getting the book until the 28th of March. So this is this really unfortunate thing that we were dealing with at the end of last year and has continued into the start of this year, that one distributor is having delays that basically mean their release of books seems to be like 2 months or so behind others. So we have to hope that this sorts itself out by the time other more important books come out, but for now this is what we do have to deal with. Now, to be fair, we do have to get into the idea that this is not a particularly notable book. And I really want to make that clear to you guys. That yes, look, it's new content. I understand wanting to read this as soon as possible. But it is really not an important story, like, at all. And it borderline is one of the few comics from Dark Horse that I just kind of wouldn't necessarily recommend to people. Because it's obviously your first sort of like for kids Avatar comic. And I think in doing that, the step down is huge. They didn't need to do such a step down because Avatar's already basically like a kid's franchise, and they just, in my mind, got it completely wrong. The story itself isn't even that interesting. Like, the description makes it sort of interesting with the whole idea, can you imagine not knowing your own birthday? But that line, Aang's birthday, is never once referenced in this book. It's all about the whole unfreezing day. And it's almost just implied in the book that it's a replacement for his birthday. I would recommend checking out the video I did late last year, where I covered my sort of like early thoughts on the book when I got my review copy for it. Just to kind of highlight, I'll link it below, just so you can take a look at that to really get a sense for like, look, the book, you know, don't worry too much if you can't read it immediately. You're not going to be missing out on anything. It, I suppose, is technically meant to be canon, but boy, it doesn't particularly feel like it, just because so little happens. And because of the way it's written, it kind of ends up coming across like, is this just meant to be kind of non-canon chibi? It doesn't even feel like it, because it's not even extreme like the Chibi comics are. So it gets where it's aiming completely wrong in my mind. The only, to me, interesting part about it is that, as we've known for a while, the book is a hardcover, as you can sort of see here. And it's kind of nice just to kind of see it like that and have basically like a little hardcover. In that, like, I wouldn't mind it if they released some of the proper comics in a kind of hardcover format like this, rather than just a paperback thing. Just so it's, you know, a little bit more durable. But, you know, it is what it is. So that's really all there is to say about that. But just remember the difference between release dates. So we'll switch over to Amazon here. And so far, it seems like Amazon is the only place that has this listing up. So Azula in the Spirit Temple finally has a listing, as you can see here. Paperback, September 26th, 2023. So with regards to the release date, first of all, that is, of course, a Tuesday. If you look it up on the calendar, that is fine. That makes sense. For an Amazon release date, Tuesday is going to be a mass market date. The question is that, I think for Dark Horse, this is their first Avatar book they've like announced, I think, since the delays to the different publishers started the distributors started happening. So it's sort of unclear of just, is September going to be the planned comic and bookstore release date for this book? Or is September already sort of acknowledging that for like the Amazon release, there probably will be a month or two extra wait for things? Is that what we're dealing with here? I'm not even sure. So that's the kind of complicated thing here, because from what I can tell, there are no listings up for this that like would say what the comic book store is. It's not up on Dark Horse. I don't think it's up on Previews World yet. Even other bookstores don't have it yet. So the way this is going to work, I think, is that September 26th obviously is going to be the Amazon digital release date and so on. Either the comic book store release date is going to be September 27th, which would be the way things have been with the comics before, where basically the book releases over the course of 2 days, which is perfectly fine. Everyone gets it within the same kind of 48-hour window. That, or the actual comic book store release date will be, like the comic we just discussed, the Chibi Comic, potentially a little bit ahead of this, but we don't actually know. The reason I say that is because if you go back to comic solicitations, regards to when this will get officially solicited for comic book stores, we just had in January the solicitations for graphic novels in June, meaning that February should have July graphic novels, which would actually mean that not even in March, but actually I think April would be when we get graphic novel solicitations for September. And it seems weird that they can put the Amazon listing up this early, but the comic announcement will have to wait much, much longer until, to announce a September book. Which makes it feel like, well, if it's here, that would probably mean it has to be announced in February solicitations, which probably means it has a July release date, potentially. This all depends on just how serious the split release date distribution issue actually is. Is this something that is going to be resolved? Or is this just now the reality for sort of book releases for the next, who knows how long? That there is just going to be a separate release date situation. Hard to say. But let's get into the actual description itself. So we haven't had this before, but it definitely is in line with what was said at the 2 Comic-Cons about the book. So, Azula continues her destabilizing campaign against the Fire Nation and her brother, Fire Lord Zuko. So straight away, continues her destabilizing campaign. That is telling you right there and then, this is set after Smoke and Shadow. Because she's only on this destabilizing campaign in Smoke and Shadow. She said she would continue it, basically. And that's what we're doing here. So we're post Smoke and Shadow, so that's great. That is what most people wanted. So that's fine. But after a failed attack on her latest target, Azula finds herself in a mysterious forest temple inhabited by a solitary monk. Or is it something more mysterious? Azula must confront her past and finally face her chance at redemption. So that feels huge. If that line, if they can deliver in any way on that in the book, and it's not just a hype line in the marketing to big up the book, but nothing actually happens, that's going to be pretty important. But at the very least, I think people have the expectations that this will be the book to transition Azula from the Smoke and Shadow stuff to whatever we're potentially going to do with her in the new Avatar Studios animated stuff. Because it feels like they're going to have to use her in one of those 2 movies that we almost have confirmed, locked in place. We know one of them is an Avatar movie. The second one is kind of behind the scenes, kind of insider information, rumored to also be a Zuko movie. Will Azula play a role in either or both of these movies? That's what I think they're doing here, is putting Azula in a position that they can work with a little bit better in the animated stuff. But, we'll see how much growth there actually is. So, what's interesting to me about this is I like that they mention that the last attack was failed. I like that it's basically saying her attacks might be frustrating to Zuko, frustrating to the Fire Nation, but fundamentally it seems like she is not full-on succeeding at changing all that much in the Fire Nation, which I think is absolutely the way they should go based on the ending of Smoke and Shadow. That is that, like, Azula thinks she can convert Zuko to be like she is, basically, so the Fire Nation has a ruler that rules in the way that she wants. But I think Zuko has had his development and should, and I think has to, hold the line on where he has been at so far. So I like that they're highlighting it's, a failed attack, latest target. I don't know if you can say maybe all the attacks have failed, but at the very least, fundamentally the Smoke and Shadow attack, I suppose, technically failed. This one failed. And there's probably a sense where, like, not everything has been going right. And this is important, I think, for Azula, to highlight that she thinks her new goal is to do this. But if she's failing at it, she eventually is going to have to question if her entire motivation is wrong. Her entire approach is wrong. And it feels like something like some sort of a spirit encounter might be one of the only things that might be able to properly, truly get through to her and make her make a bigger change. Now, probably the biggest new reveal in all of this is the whole idea that, okay, temple, it's in the title, but the solitary monk that they're implying there's something more mysterious about it. And given that the book already mentions, like, spirits. Now, it's interesting that the description technically doesn't mention spirits. So are they implying that the monk is actually a spirit or something like that? What's the deal here? At the very least, it seems like this is not going to be some sort of an explanation about, like, the Kumurikage smoke powers comes from this or something like that, because it's set afterwards. So this monk at the temple here, I'm guessing the way that we're going to get to Azula confronting her past, whatever specifically that means, facing her chance at redemption, is that she's talked about how she now knows what her destiny is. Is this going to be us sort of seeing Azula like Azula will properly see what her destiny is through some sort of a spiritual kind of encounter or vision type thing? That would be quite interesting to see what they do with it. And then there's the whole idea of, are we talking kind of light spirit, dark spirit in all of this? What's the motivations of this monk? What type of spirit is it in the first place, outside of the fact light or dark? That's fascinating to me, because obviously this is where you probably have to bring in stuff like from the RPG. Now, I've talked about this before. I don't want to read too much into the stuff from the RPG with regards to just, like, what Azula's about. But you'll note that in the Azula section in the RPG book, it does say that, it says, manipulate the new Oza society into attacking Zuko to make him strong, or so she claims. Despite everything that has happened, Azula may very well care for the welfare of her brother. Though their relationship remains tenuous, Azula still has the remaining fire warriors at her disposal. But she could choose to strike out on her own instead. Chances are she isn't far from Zuko, and she is unlikely to be willingly taken alive. And they talk about how, a lot of the Fire Warriors were captured in Smoke and Shadow. Many of the others got away, with their numbers reduced, and Azula not necessarily standing by the group she founded. Like, that's kind of new information. The Fire Warriors are wantonly reckless with their plans. She might target heroes who help Zuko, or find ways to turn other citizens against their Fire Lord. So that's interesting. And then in one of the kind of places where, like, it's hard to judge if this is meant to be treated as canon or it's just an idea for if you play the role-playing game. There's a Aang era adventure hook called The Assassination, where it says, Ping Yi, a local firebending prankster who does odd jobs for local criminals in the Fire Nation, warns the companions about an impending assassination attempt on Iso, a high-ranking military official who supported Zuko's rise to power. Ping Yi has been trying to warn any adult for weeks, but no one believes him because he's a notorious prankster. The assassination plot is real enough, but is only a distraction, an excuse for the Fire Warriors to incite a riot in the capital and bring Zuko's reign into question once again. So I'm not trying to say that that incident is necessarily what the failed attack here is, but it's highlighting just the idea that, yeah, they're doing a lot of little things like this overall. So there is that. Now, the other point in all of this is from the adventure guide. If you go to the Azula page where you get the Azula Legend NPC, it says here her drive is to dethrone Zuko and rule the Fire Nation. And I've always had a little bit of an issue with that, because if you read Smoke and Shadow, that is clearly not technically what her drive is at the end. Because it's literally stated, I don't want to be Fire Lord anymore. I want to basically make you the Fire Lord the way I want you to be. So is that going to be a return to the way she wants to do things or not? A bit weird. And even like double down on it later on in the book. They masqueraded as Khmer Kage and exerted their influence over the reactionary New Ozai society, but Azula maintains that her true purpose is to seize the Fire Nation throne. And it's like, yes, but not in the way that you're kind of saying it is. So, I don't know. I personally, I wouldn't read too much into that point specifically, because I'd be a little bit disappointed if the kind of result of this book is that it's just basically putting Azula back on basically kind of where she is in the search, but just not as crazed in a way as she was in the search. So if she's just back to, oh, I actually do want to become the Fire Lord again, and just she's working just on her own against Zuko, I guess that's something if they want to do it that way. And it's probably maybe one of the better positions to put Azula in ahead of the new animated projects, where we assume if they do choose to do an actual redemption for the character, would be where they actually do the big character work to make that happen. This is just some of the, I think, setup work to get us there. Because I think I'd be very, very surprised if this is the book that just actually kind of starts the quote-unquote Azula redemption arc, or just character arc to shift her away from where she currently is. Because again, I know a lot of people seem to take issue with the word redemption, but to me, I just treat redemption as basically meaning character arc that will take her away from being an out-and-out villain. She can still be villainous in some ways, but by redemption, I think that's what they're meaning. She's going to make a turn for the better in her arc. It doesn't necessarily mean full Zuko level redemption where she will join Team Avatar. That's not what I think they're getting at all. So, it's kind of one of those things where, like, sure, in the end, is there that much to speculate on here? Not really sure. But it definitely focuses us in on the idea that it's set after Smoke and Shadow, which is very good, and that for sure they're going for something, I think, relatively big with her as a character. And she is the kind of main character with the most kind of character growth, I think, still to go through of the main ATLA characters. This should be pretty big. Now, going back to the release date thing just a little bit, I think obviously September, if that's when the full release is, that's frustrating, because in my mind, September is not summer. They said summer back at the Comic-Cons. Now, admittedly, it was just an estimate, of course, and I suppose technically this is just barely missing summer, but this is where, again, we wonder, is the comic book store release date maybe going to be a July release or what? Make of that what you will. So, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the fact that this book is out in some places at the moment, and then some extra details on Azula in the Spirit Temple. So that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.